Shasali called Sorki Baruch Atadanain Hinukam, Ozier Sabik Vara, Baruch Atadanain Hinukam, Otir, Sabiti Vara, Baruch Atadanain Hinukam, Hanoten Laya Eth Koach. We may be seated. Baruch Atadanain. ودنين هايوم وخال يوم خان الخسر رحمين بينك خرويني وبتك مالين وخسرين توفين باروخ هترناي قومل خسرين توفين لما يسرائيل. Page 106 toward the top. Shrenu Matav Chalkino Manaim Gralino Maya Fayusha Seno Shrenu Shanachtu Mashkimim Amarivim Eravokerarim Pamai Mechol Yom Shmaha Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Atahu Ad Shelo Nivra Olam Atahu Misha Nivra Hom Atahu Balam Hazeh Atahu Le'olam Haba. Kadesh Shimcha Makdish Shmecha Vekadesh Shimcha Valamecha Vishuetacha Tarim Vetagvia Kanino Baruch Atadonai Mekadesh Shimcha Barabihim. Page 116 for the Psalm for Pesach. Yom Chag Pesach Shebo Omrim Hodulai Kitov Ki Le'Ram Chasta Hodulai. Send the Khabasar Kidam Kasta Hodulero, the El Hashemim Kidam Kasto. It's a little bit like Dayenu, right? This psalm is kind of interesting because after each little thing, Kili Olam Chasto, for God's kindness is everlasting. A little bit like an early forerunner of Dayenu. We continue page 120. Mizmor Sher Charakat Avad Ledavi Idaromim הפכתי מספדי למחולי ביתך, תעשה כבידו ותעזרני שמחה, למען זמרך חבל ולא ירם אדוני אלוהי לעולמותיך. We rise, page 122, and can gather our two front tzitziot. Baruch shehamar v'haya hoda'am baruch Baruch oseh v'reishis Baruch omer v'oseh Baruch gozer mekayem Baruch marachem al haaretz Baruch merachem al habriot Baruch meshalem sachar tov le'rehav Baruch elahad v'kayam lanetzach Baruch borei amatzeo Baruch shemo Baruch Adonai Yachid Chei Ha'olamim Melech Mishmar Ariyat Shuhiro Baruch Atadonai Melech Mahulal Batish Bachot 123 Hadul Adonai Kiruv Vishmo Hadika. Page 124. Ki gadol Adonai hulal ma'or v'norahu al Elohim ki kol Elohei ha'amim elohim v'Adonai shamayim ha'sa'ahod v'adar levanar oz v'echad v'abim kol ma'or. Page 125. Romamu Adonai Ninu Ishtachavu Lahadam Raglav Kadoshu Romamu Adonai Ninu Ishtachavu Lahar Kocho Ki Kadosh Adonai Ninu Burach Mechaper. 126. Anai Tod Asher Hamadech Machanai Hoshia Hamalach Yanenu Ve'am Korino Hoshia As Amachavarach and Nachala Sechar Emanasem. Anochi Adonai Lecha Hamalcha Meretz Mitzrayim Harchet Picha V'Malehu Ashrei Ham Shekacha Lo Ashrei Ham Shalala Avani B'Chazdecha V'Tachti Yageli B'Shuasecha Asher Adonai Ki Gama Alai 127 Lamnatzech Mizmor LaDavid Hashabayim Mesaprim Kevohu Dehil U'Maasei Adam Magid Harakia Yom Page 128. LeDavid b'shanato et amo lifnei v'melech v'yishecho v'yelach avarch et alay b'chalei tarit. Page 129. A prayer of Moses, man of God. Adonai, you have been our refuge in every generation. Before mountains were born, before you shaped earth and land, from the very beginning to the end of time, you are God. Page 129 on the left side, around the third paragraph from the bottom. Teach us to make our days count and so acquire a heart that is wise. Turn to us, Adonai. How long will we wait? Comfort your servants. At daybreak satisfy us with your love and kindness, that we may sing with joy all our days. Grant us days of happiness equal to those we suffered, the years we saw so much wrong. May your servants see your deeds. May your glory be upon their children. May the peace of the Lord our God be with us. May the work of our hands last beyond us. May the work of our hands be lasting. Nice to read the prayer of Moses on this day. Page 130. יקראני בעיניהו עמו אנוכי וצרה חלצכם וחמדכם אורכם יመስביהו וראהו בשועשי אורכם יመስביהו וראהו בשועשי 131 Hallelujah Hallelujah כי אני ידעתי כי גדול אדוני ולעניין מכל Beit Yisrael Baruch Hu Es Adonai, Beis Haron Baruch Hu Es Adonai, Beis Levi Baruch Hu Es Adonai, Yireh Adonai Baruch Hu Es Adonai, Baruch Adonai Mitzion, Shochen Yerushalayim, Hallelujah. We rise, 132. Hod hod l'Adonai Kitab, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Hod hod l'Elohei Elohim, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Hod l'Adonai Adonim, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Hasiniv los kedal l'svalo, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Los hashmayim b'savuna, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Rak haaretz al hamayim, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. Los yarim gedolim, ki le'olam gel'olam chasdo. As Hashem shalom shalas bayom, ki le'olam gel'olam גרלם חסתו אסרח וכוחנו שלוש בלילה כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ומקבציים בבחוריהם כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ויוצא ישראל מתוכם כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ויהיה חזקה ושעון נטויה כי לעולם גרלם חסתו וגוזר ים סוף בלי גזרים כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ועבר ישראל בסוחה כי לעולם גרלם חסתו בני הפרו וחילו וים סוף כי לעולם גרלם חסתו לא לחמו במדבר כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ומק מלאכים גדולים כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ורק מלאכים אדירים כי לעולם גרלם חסתו סיחון מלך המורי כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ולאוג מלך הבשן כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ונשן ארצם לנחלה כי לעולם גרלם חסתו נחלה ישראל עבדו כי לעולם גרלם חסתו שבש לנו זכר לנו כי לעולם גרלם חסתו ויפקנו מצערנו כי לעולם גרלם חסתו נושא לחם לך בשר כי לעולם גרלם חסתו הודו לאל השמיים כי לעולם גרלם חסתו. We may be seated, page 136. אשרים שביתך עוד יעלו חסלה, אשרים שככה לך שם. Especially I got a kittle later. Yeah. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה. 137 הללויה. הלי נפשי יסללה. עני שומעת קרים יתום אמנה יודעת בדרך השם יעבד ימלוך עני לעולם מלך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. 138 הללויה כי טוב זמרה אלוהינו כי נעים נבעתי לה בוני ירושלים עני נדחי ישראל יכנס הרופא לשבור אלוהו המכבש לצבוסם. מגיד דבריו לעקוב חוקם משפטיו לישראל עשה כן לחוקם משפטים בל ידעום. הללויה. 139 הללויה. הללויה סלאם ירושלים הללויה. Vayam karen lamoti la lachal chasidav livnei Yisrael amkuro. Hallelujah. 140. Hallelujah. Shiru l'Adonai shir chadash. לאסור מלכיהם וזיקים ונכבדיכם וחבלי ברזל לעשות בהם משפט כתוב הדור ולכל חסדיו. Hallelujah. 141. Hallelujah. Hallelujah, v'tzaltzalei Shema, hallelujah, v'tzaltzalei Yisroel, kol hanashmat hallelujah, hallelujah, kol hanashmat hallelujah, hallelujah. Baruch Hanai Le'olam, amen v'amen, Baruch Hanai Mitzion Shulchan Yerushalayim, hallelujah. Baruch Hanai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael Sanivlod Levaro, u'Baruch Shem Kvodo Li'olam Yimalech, V'ro et kol haaretz, amen v'amen. 142. V'yivarech David et Adonai Le'nei HaKol, v'yomer David, Baruch et Adonai. אתה הוא אדוני לבדך אתה עשית את השמיים שמי שמיים בכל צבאם הארץ וכל אשר עליה הימין וכל אשר בהם ואתה מחיה את כולם וצבא השמיים לך משתחווים. אתה הוא אדוני אלוהים אשר בכתב אברהם והוצאתו מאור כסדים ושמת שמו אברהם ומצאת אלוהו למען לפניך וחרוס עמו הבריס לתת Vayam bakat alevam vayvru v'tochem abasha v'rot v'yamishlach davim tzlot k'mo even b'mayim hazim. 143. Vayosh Adonai bayom hahu es Yisrael mi'ad mitzrayim vayar Yisrael es mitzrayim es asvasayam vayar Yisrael es hayad hagdolah asher asa Adonai b'mitzrayim vayar uham es Adonai v'aminu b'Adonai u'v'Moshe avdo. Az yashir Moshe ovanei Yisrael es asher hazos l'Adonai vayomru le'emor ha'ashir l'Adonai ki gahoga sus v'roch v'orahama v'ayam hozi v'zimrasya v'yahili lishua ze'eli v'yan ve'hu Elohei aviv v'amim menhu. מי כמוכם אלים עלי מי כמוכם נראה בקודש ראיתי לא תאסף אלינו נחית לך וחסתך המזוקת עד יבוא עמך אדוני עד יבוא המזוקני אדוני ימלוך לעולם ואדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. 144 in the middle. On the left side. Then Miriam the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand and went out, followed by all the women with timbrels and danced. And Miriam led them in response, sing to Adonai, who has triumphed gloriously, who cast horse and rider into the sea. Bayom hahu Adonai echadu shema'ah. Page 145, we may be seated. Nishmas kocha tvarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu veruach kobasat tvarech osramem zichrecha malkinu tamid min haolam ve'ad haolam atahel atahel. Page 146. Nehalelecha uneshabechacha nefarecha nerechet shem kodshecha kamor leDavid baruchi nafshi esalai v'chol garayat shem kodsho. Page 147 at the top. Hahel betatzu motu zecha Hagadol bichvot shemecha Hagibor lanetzach vanora benora secha Ha-ha-melech ha-yoshev Hagise ramvanisa Shochenan maharom v'kadosh shemo V'afir sharim tithalal, v'divrei tzadikim titbarach, v'v'lashon chasadim titromam, v'kerev kedashim titkadash, v'makalot revot tzamacha beit Yisrael, barinu yipashim. Sheken chavot kol yitzin levanech lehadod, lehalel, leshabeach, lefarel, leramem, lehader, levarech, al-aleh, al-kales, al-kol divrei shirot, v'tishbechot, David ben Yeshai avdecha, Meshichecha. We rise. Just getting them warmed up for you. Yeah, whenever you're ready. Yishtabach Shimecha Lahad Malkeinu Ha'el Barachad Adot Me'atavad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai El Melech Gadol B'Tishbachot El Ha'odot Adonai Niflot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech El Chei Ha'olamim. We're on page 148. Page 148 with Chatzi Kadesh.
Yekadav Yekadash Mehi Rabaha Yomadi Berkay Mokote Bechayechon Mechon Ubchaye Chov Yisrael Bagalav is Makarivim Ru Amen Yehesh Me Rama Barak Memaya Yebarak V'Yishtabak V'Parsev Yedadar V'Yedalev Lo Shmidikutat Brichu Leila Mikor Barchata V'Shirata Tushbachata V'Nachamatan V'Ram Yama V'Imru Amen.
And I apologize because we don't have a minion just yet. Sorry, we don't actually have a minion here just yet, but we're getting closer. We remember the mitzvah to love our fellow as yourself. That's one thing that we weren't necessarily feeling in Egypt, was all of that love, and that's part of the lesson is that we need to have love for one another and create a society based on that, not on squishing people. We continue now on page 150. We may be seated. We don't do bar.
Well, this is Chabawi recites. We skip this.
So we just do this.
Baharuch Hanamachalam Yoser Ubre Choshet Ose Shalom Rei Et HaKol.
We continue on page 152 in the middle of the page.
Amir Larel Davrim Alecha Barachamim.
We're so close.
Deep Barak Adonai Eloheinu Al Shevach Masa Yadecha Beol Mare Or Shasita Yeferu Chasela Deep Barak
153.
Kadoshim Kulam Achuvim Kulam Barim Kulam Gibrim Bekulam Osei Osim Vira Rason Konaham Bekulam Potechem Epichem Bitushav Tahara Bishimra Varkim Shabachim Farim Marazim Magishim Mamlachim Shem Hael Hamelagado Hagibor Hanara Kadoshu Bekulam Mikalim Alechem Umochu Shemaim Zemizeb Nodim Rushu Zelazet Lahaktish Liratram but Nacha Ravara Vemakadoshaha Kulam Kechad Onim Rarim Biraha Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvaho Melech Haaretz Kavod Opening Bechayot HaKodesh Barash Gadol Minasim Lamat Serafim Lamatam Shabachim Ba'omrim Baruch Kavod Adonai Mihim Komo Leil Baruch Nitenu. Chadash al Tzion Tayer V'Nizgech Ulanu Mechera L'Ora Baruch Adonai Yosher HaMaroch.
Amen. 154. We may gather our tzitziot together.
V'cha Eranenu B'Toratecha V'Dahabek V'Beinu B'Tfotecha V'Yachem V'Hevavenu Li'ahava U'Yira Et Shemecha V'Loho Nevosh Li'olam Vahed V'Loho Nevosh Li'olam Vahed Ki B'Shem Kachecha Hagadol Manara Batachnu Nagila v'nismecha, Nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha. V'chavienu l'shalom me'arba kanfo ha'aretz. V'toholichenu komimiyut la'artzeinu. Ki ebo el yeshuata uvanu v'char
ושמרת מכל ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודו לך, ולייחדך, ולייחדך ביאהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בישראל ביאהבה. 155.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'yavta ha'ed Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol meodecha, v'chayu hadarim ha'eleh, asher anochi b'savecha, chayom ol levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibartam. ושבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לו תותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובישעריך.
156.
Adonai Elohechem Emet. L'dor v'dor hu kayam u'shmo kayam v'chiso nachon u'malchuto v'imoto li'ad kayam.
157. Rav Chaim v'kayamim.
Mokenu melech avotenu go aleinu v'imotenu go aleinu go avotenu motenu yotzreinu shuatenu podenu matzilenu melam shemecha ein Elohim zulatecha zrat avotenu motenu ataku meolam. Ramadi Sagadol Benaramash Pilgrim Umagbiya Shefalim Motsi Asiru Fodam Navim Bio Seher Dalim Bio Nelly Amo Beit Shabah Melahav.
At this point, we can get ready. We're welcome to rise. The Amidah, the festival Amidah, is found on page 306, and we'll be traveling there in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and open up the ark so that we can daven the Amidah with, we're welcome to daven together through the Kedusha. Right now, page 158 with Tehilot.
Tehilot le'el yom baruch marach Moshe umyam uvnei Yisrael l'chanashiraha b'zikra rabba v'imru chulaham mi chamocha b'helim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh nohora tehilot oseh fedeh Shirach hadasha shebekugelin l'shimcha hosafach hayam Yachad kulam hodu v'himlechu v'yahamru Adonai himloch le'olam vahed Sur Yisrael Kuma v'yezra Yisrael Ufdei knumecha Yehuda v'Yisrael Go aleinu Adonai tzvaot shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Go Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avotenu v'Imateinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzhak Ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei Avodim Achot Umevi goel ivnei v'nechem leman shemo b'yahava melech osir v'okedim Moshiach u'mogen Baruch atah Adonai mogen v'bracha mufgot tzei sarah Atagi boile lam Adonai mechaye metim atav lechoshiyah Mashiva ruach umarid hagashem mechalkel chayim bechesed mechaye metim berachamim rabim So make no fleem verofei choholim umatir asurim umekahayehem emunatoho lishenei afar Micha mocha ba'al givurot umidoho melach melech meimihid umechahayeh umatzmiach Yeshua v'nem anatala hachayot meitim Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh ha-meitim Kahadesh Eshikha Ba'olam Geshem Shemali Shemoto Bishmei Marohom Kakatuv V'Yanaviyecha V'Karazeh El Zeh V'Yamar Kadosh, 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 Adonai, Tzva'achot, Melocho, Haaretz, Kevodo, Azbekol, Rosh, Gadol, Adir, V'Zak, Mashmim, Kohol, Minatzim, L'Matzarafim, L'Matam, Baruch, Yomeru. Baruch v'nai mihim komo, mim komachamo kehenu tofia, v'tim loch aleinu, ki mechakim anachnu lach, matai tim loch b'tziyohom, v'karo b'yameinu, li'olam v'ahed, tihishkon, tihit gadol, v'tihit kahadash, b'toch Yerushalayim ircha, Lidor vador, Lidor vador, u'neitzad nisachim, V'heinenu tirena tirena malchutecha kahadavar ha'amor b'shirei u'huzecha all yedei David mitzitzecha Yimlach ha'olam elochai yitziyahon l'dor v'dor hallelujah l'dor v'dor nagig alecha u'neitzad nesachim kedushak datish v'shivachach Eloheinu mipinu lo yishlam v'ayed Ki el melech kadosh kadosh ata Baruch Adonai Ehel HaKadosh
If you're still davening, please go ahead and continue. At this time, we turn to page 316 for Hallel. We're skipping 315, unless anyone brought their lulav. Page 316 with Hallel.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kiddush mitzvah v'tivanu likrot et hachalel.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kiddush mitzvah v'tivanu likrot et hachalel.
Hallelujah. Miki mi me fardo me shapo yarim avyon lachoshivim invi inve amo moshivim akeret abayit aim habanim smecha hallelujah b'tzeit Yisrael mi mitzrayim beit Yaakov me'am lohev b'tzeit Yisrael mi mitzrayim beit Yaakov me'am lohev Hayta Yehuda lekacho Yisrael mamshalosav Hayam Rahabayanos Hayardim Yisov leachor Hecharim Yarkedu Chelim Givaov Kinetzon Malecha Hayam Kitanus Hayardim Tisov leachor Heharim Tirkedu Chelim Givahot Kivnetzon Milifnei Adon Chuli Haaretz Milifnei Elohei Yaakov Havochi Chatzor Agamayim Kalahamish Lemino Mahayim 317 though. Yisrael Bitak Bahadonai Yisrael Ezamu Maginamhu Beit Acharon Bichul Adonai Ezrahamu Maginamhu Yurei Adonai Bichul Adonai Ezrahamu Maginamhu Yisrael Bitak Bahadonai Yisrael Ezamu Maginamhu Adonai Zacharanu Yevarech et Beit Yisrael Yevarech et Beit Aharon Yevarech Yirei Adonai Haktanim im Hagedolim Yosef Adonai Alechem v'yal b'neiechem Beruchim atem Adonai Oseh Shamayim v'haaretz Shamayim l'Adonai V'haaretz natan l'bnei Adam Lo hametim Hallelujah V'lo kol yordei duma V'anachnu nevarech Yah Me'ata v'yahad olam Me'ata v'yahad olam Hallelujah Dai 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 Hallelujah.
318.
What's that? Page 317?
318.
Monty Ganaber, Ani Tabmio, Ani Marti Bachatsi, Ko Adam, Kose, Shiva. Nederadana Shalem, Negadana, Na Lecho Amo, Bechatz Rot, Beit Adonai, B'tok Yerushalayim, Hallelujah.
319.
Hallelujah, Adonai, Kol Goyim, Shabechuhu, Kol Halumim, Ki Gavara Aleinu, Chasto, Behemet, Adonai, Leolam, Hallelujah. Hodu Ladonai ki leolam chazdo yomarna Yisrael ki leolam chazdo yomruna beidachara ki leolam chazdo Yomruna Yerei Adonai ki leolam chasto min chametzar kaharatiya anani b'hamerkavya min chametzar kaharatiya anani b'hamerkavya anani b'hamerkavya
$320.
Korina Vishua Be'alet Tzadikim. Korina Vishua Be'alet Tzadikim. Yamin Adonai Osachayil. Yamin Adonai Osachayil. Yamin Adonai Rohema. Yamin Adonai Osachayil. Pituchu li Sharei Tzedek Avova Modeyah. Pituchu li Sharei Tzedek Avova Modeyah. Zeh HaShahar LaDonai Tzadikim Yavovo. Zeh HaShahar LaDonai Tzadikim Yavovo. Odecha ki anitani v'tahili lishua. Odecha ki anitani v'tahili lishua. Even masu habonim hayta lirosh pina. Even masu habonim hayta lirosh pina. Et Adonai hayta zot ki niflat b'einenu. Et Adonai hayta zot ki niflat b'einenu. Zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismechavo. Zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismechavo. Adonai Hoshiana.
Adonai Hoshiana.
Adonai Hoshiana.
Adonai Hoshiana.
Adonai Hatzlichana.
Adonai Hatzlichana.
Adonai Hatzlichana.
Adonai Hatzlichana. Baruch Hashem.
Eliata v'hodeka, Elohai romemeka. Eliata v'hodeka, Elohai romemeka. Eliata ata v'hodeka, Elochai roma meheka, Eliata v'hodeka, Elochai v'roma meheka, Hodu, Ladonai, Ki tov, Ki lioholam, Ki lioholam chasdo. Yada da 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 da, yada da da da, yada da da, yada da 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 da, yada da da da, yada da da da, yada da da da. Hodu, Ladonai, Ki tov, Ki lioholam hasdo. Yada da 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 da, yada da da, yada da 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 da, yada da 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 da, yada da da, yada da da da.
321.
Ki lechato lechadol l'shimcha na'el lezamer, ki me'elam bi'ad alam ata'el, baharuch atalonai melech mithulo batish bacho.
Amen. Kaddish Shalem.
Yekadov yekle shemei rabba bi'omad, yivrak nezi bakutei b'cha yechon mechon b'cha yeduchu b'Israel, ba'galav is makri v'imaru. Amen. Yehi shemei rabba mevorach, li'olam bi'omei amaya. Yibarak, Yistabak, Yitpa Argam, Save, Yadar, Yalev, Loshmi, the Kudasha, Brich, Lielam, Kobarkata, Shirata, Chupakata, Vanakamata, the Rami Mavi Imaru, Amen, Tikabos, Lokon, Udakon, Tusrael, Kadam, Abukhadishmaya, Imaru, Amen, Shlama, Rabami, Shemai, Vechayim, Alain, Vakosrael, Imaru, Amen, Hose, Shalom, Biruma, Huyas, Shalom, Aleinu. Ve'yalkoh Yisrael, ve'imaru, imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu. Ve'yalkoh Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu. Ve'yalkoh Yisrael, ve'imaruhu, amen.
Yashakach va. Good Yontif, everyone. The Torah service is found on page 322.
Ein kamocha ve'Elohim Adonai ve'ein kema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai melech Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai oz le'al yiten Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom av harachamim heitiv avirtzoncha et Zion tivnei chomot Yerushalayim tivnei chomot Yerushalayim ki vecha levad batachnu melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim Vayechi bin Soah Ha'aron Vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai Ve'afutzu oivecha Ve'anusu misanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael
B'kedushato. 323, the 13 attributes.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Halafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Halafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Halafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakeh. Va'ani, page 323 at the bottom. Va'ani tefilati, tefilati, lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim beroch hastecha Aneini, Aneini, be'emet yishecha. Va'ani tefilati, tefilati, lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim beroch hastecha Aneini, Aneini, be'emet yishecha. Va'ani tefilati, tefilati, lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim beroch hastecha Aneini, Aneini, be'emet yishecha.
Page 325.
Bereshit Amare Alma. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlul Adonai iti, Uramama Shemo Yahda. This way, sorry.
Hagedula, Behagevura, Behatiferet, ve'anetza ve'od ki chol b'shamayim uvaretz ki chol b'shamayim uvaretz lecha Adonai hamamlacha ve'amid na'aseh lechol rosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu L'Adon Raglav Kadoshu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu L'Arkocho Ki Kadosh Adonai
Eloheinu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'arkocho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'arkocho. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Romemu. Thank you, Rabbi. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. We may be seated. The Torah reading for today is found in the Big Burgundy Book on page 385. Page 385, as our ancestors get ready to observe Passover. Maybe you'll notice a few differences back then than from now. I'm glad that the doorposts don't need smearing at this point. Gewalt. Okay, page 385, we begin. Mitch, thank you for reading our first Aliyah. This is verse 21.
Ya'azor v'yogim v'yashilachol achosim bo v'nomar amen. Hagol havu god Eloheinu u'savu chavo l'Torah ya'amod. Rishon Baruch Shanasan Torah L'Imo Yisrael B'Kedushato.
V'atem hadvekim Adonai Chaim kolchem hayom.
V'atem hadvekim Adonai Elohechem Chaim kolchem hayom.
Baruch hu et Adonai habarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai barach le'olam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. V'yikra Moshe l'chol ziknei Yisrael v'yomar aleihem mishchuchu lachem tzon mishptichem v'shachatu ha'pasach ulkachtem agudat azov uvtovtem badam asher basaf v'higatem al hamashkof v'al shetei hamezuzot min hadam asher basaf v'atem lo teitzu ish mi pacha beito ad boker va'avor Adonai lingofid Misraim v'ra et hadam el hamashkof v'al shetei hamezuzot Pesach Adonai Ufasach Adonai al hapetach v'lo yitenam hamashchit levo el batechem lingof ushmartem et hadavar hazeh lechok lecha ulvanecha ad olam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. So here, of course, we find out a little bit about the putting the blood on the doorpost. The doorposts are actually called mezuzot. So mezuzah, it's as I sometimes tell the students, you have a mezuzah, and inside the mezuzah is a mezuzah, which you put on the mezuzah. So mezuzah is actually, what the meaning is doorpost, that's a mezuzah. And the scroll, we call a mezuzah, and often they go in the gift shop to buy a mezuzah. But really, the real meaning is doorpost, and mashkof is the top part of it, and that makes that kind of structure with these posts, the three different sides, the sides, and then the top is the mashkof. So it's interesting that the blood is on all of that, and that will be a sign that God should pass over those houses. What can I say? It's challenging. This whole part of it is challenging. One of the things that we can remember about this is that earlier on in the Torah, I think it's maybe 8:22. Someone could go check, but it talks about actually how the Israelites would not sacrifice any animals within the surroundings there, because the Egyptians, for them, it's like killing one of their gods. Not only have they killed one of their gods, but they've taken its blood and kind of put it on the doorpost. This is definitely a sign that you have left the Egyptian culture at this point. So this act that often either we don't even talk about because ew, but is actually a really rebellious act that has just occurred, right? It's something that defies the norms of the society that they're living in. And that's something that's interesting to kind of think about. This act that normally this whole, that we go and God passes over, but this act of killing this animal, whether it could be a goat or a lamb, it's one of the flock like that, and putting its blood on the doorposts, this is really like in your face. It's about as in your face in that society as you can get. So it's after this act of defiance, and in some ways, this is an act that the Israelites have to do. It's not just that God is doing it for them, right? Like maybe the different plagues or something, but each individualite household has to kind of make this act of defiance in order for this to work. So we continue now, page 386, with verse 25.
Tamod Sheni.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Amen. V'haya ki tavo'u el ha'aretz asher yitain Adonai lachem ka'asher diber ushmarten et ha'avodah hazot v'haya ki yomru alechem b'nechem ha'avodah hazot lachem v'martem zevach Pesachu l'Adonai asher pasach El b'tei b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim b'nagpo et Mitzrayim ve'et patanu tinu hitzil v'yikod ha'am v'yishachavu v'yelchu v'ya'asu b'nei Yisrael ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe ve'Acharon kein asu.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet B'chayei Olam Natan Tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. And I just want to point out that Debbie Lempert has taught our children in our congregation for many, many years. And so I think this is very fitting aliyah for you, because it says, when your children asked and how you should teach them, and this is something beautiful. How many of them are asking in the classroom, right? Mostly kindergartners and first graders. How many of them say, like, what's this about? What is this whole Passover thing? Do any of them ask it like that?
No.
No. Do you talk about, like, passing over that idea?
Occasionally, you'll get a kid who, when you start to talk about putting the blood on the door, they will, and we talk about how the angel of death passes over. Some kid will go, pass over, but it's pretty rare. But a kid or two get it.
Well, but this is exactly the usage of Pesach here. Pesach al batei v'nei Yisrael. God Pesached over the houses of the children of Israel. Thank you, Debbie, for reading and for your teaching. Mr. Allen is going to read on page 387, verse 29 in the middle of the night.
Yamod Shlishi.
Baruch Hu Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayhi b'chatzi halayla v'Adonai hikakol bechor b'eretz Mitzrayim מבכור פרעה היושב על כיסאו עד בכור השביעי אשר בבית הבור וכל בכור בהמה ויקם פרעה לילה הוא בכל עבדיו וכל מצרים ותהי צעקה גדולה במצרים כי אין בית אשר אין שם מת ויקרא למשה לירון לילה ויאמר קומו צאו מתוך עמי גם אתם גם בני ישראל ולכו עבדו את אדוני כדברכם גם צאנכם גם בקרכם קחו כאשר דיברתם בלכו ובראתם גם אותי ותחזה מצרים על העם למהר לשלחם מן הארץ כי אמרו כולנו מתים וישם את בצקו טרם יחמץ בשערותם צרורות בסמלותם על שכמם ובני ישראל עשו כדבר משה וישאלו ממצרים כלי כסף וכלי זהב ושמלות ואדוני נתן את חן העם בעיני מצרים וישאלום וינצלו את מצרים.
Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Lev was looking at a picture book. It's actually kind of Passover stickers this morning. And I'll just try and show kind of for this plague, Makat Bechorot, the picture was this. It was someone who was just a person just covering their eyes, that they couldn't see it. And Lev asked me this morning, but that's not quite how that plague looks like, right? So they have, obviously they have frogs showing the frogs, right? They have different things showing the different plagues. And he asked me, why are they showing this picture when that's not how this plague looked like? And I said, well, we discussed kind of something what would be appropriate for kids. It's a kid's sticker book and showing the death of all the firstborn, like it's kind of hard to show kids. And we spoke about, well, what would an adult picture book look like? And I said, even there often you don't see the full extent of it, right? Even when we have often various movies, first of all, in the past it wasn't as common as it is today to see the blood and the guts and things like that, even in war movies. I remember when Saving Private Ryan came out, and a friend of mine shared the experience with me about he and his spouse going, and he said that his spouse had commented, now I have some understanding of what it might be like. And his response was, now I have really no understanding of what it might be like. Meaning if this is the little bit that they're showing us on the screen, right, and this is more graphic than war movies maybe had been previously, then how much more would it have been to actually be there? And I think this is a very difficult part of it. We do, I understand, live in a world where we're not yet in the Messianic era, although Elijah did pop by yesterday, so maybe that's a good sign. But we're not there yet, and unfortunately, war is still part of the reality that there are things that sometimes must be done in order to achieve what we need to achieve, and yet at the same time, it's painful, and it's really a painful part of this story. And at the very least, I'm glad that I'm part of a faith tradition that really recognizes that, both in the taking out of our cups some of the joy, and also the legends about, that the angels aren't allowed to celebrate in the same way, because as God said, my children are drowning in the sea. There's both kind of an understanding that, okay, this might be the reality, but it's painful nevertheless. So we'll continue with the next aliyah. This is the fourth aliyah. It's on page 388 with verse 37.
Yamod Revi'i.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael meromsei Sukkotah Kishesh mi'od elef ragli hagvarim levad mitaf v'gam erev rav avla itam v'tzon bakar migneh kaved mi'od v'yafud habatzek asher hotziu b'nei mitzrayim Ugo matzo ki lo chametz, ki gorshu mitzrayim, velo yachlu lehitma hameha, v'gam seda lo asu lahem. Umoshe b'nei Yisrael asher yashvu b'Mitzrayim, 30 shana v'yaba me'ot shana, v'yehi mikeh 30 shana v'yaba me'ot shana, v'yehi B'etzem hayom hazeh yatzu kol tzivot Adonai me'eretz Mitzrayim le'el shimarim hu l'Adonai l'hotziah me'eretz Mitzrayim hu halayla hazeh l'Adonai shimurim l'chol b'nei Yisrael l'dorotam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayil tab tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. And if you're observing a yard site, then please come up for this next aliyah, our fifth aliyah. And our fifth aliyah, among other things, it talks about that anyone who's Jewish can observe Passover. Well, that may sound obvious, but it has an idea, Yasher Koach, first of all, that we encountered in the last aliyah, which was about the Erev Rav. This is an interesting question. What tribe do we come from? Which one of the 12 sons of Jacob do we come from? I might not come from any of them. I might have been in that Erev Rav, that mixed multitude that came up that wasn't actually related to Jacob, right? That's an interesting part of our story, is from the beginning of our people standing there at Mount Sinai, our people were not all descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, right? We had a mixed group already there, but that anyone who chose to be Jewish, right, and for men that meant also becoming circumcised, you could join the people, Am Yisrael. You could join Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. And that's very important. That idea of circumcision is going to come back up in the Haftorah in a very prominent way. And they have kind of a national circumcision. That had to be an interesting experience to attend. But this is something that there's a way of joining our people, and it's not an exclusive people. Everyone is welcome to join, but there are entrance requirements. Page 389, verse 43.
Tamod Chamishi.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Amen. Vayomer na Moshe v'Acharon zodu kana Pesach kol ben nechar lo yochal boho v'cho evedish mignat kasev umal taho toho az yochal boho to shav v'sachir lo yochal boho v'vayid echad yechel kol chotzi min ha'abayid min ha'basar chutza v'yetzem lo tishpru voho Kol da Yisrael Yatsu Oto V'chi Yagir Itecha Gahar V'yasaf Pesach Lenonahai Chimuhu Lo Kol Zachar V'yaz Yikrav Latsoto V'chi Yazrak Haaretz V'chol Rehel Lo Yochal Boho Torahadech Achad Yiyeh Le'ezra V'lager Hagar B'tochechem V'yasu came b'nei Yisrael kasher tzivadu nahayed Moshe v'yed Acharon ken yatsuhu v'yechi b'etzem chayom hazeh chotzi Adonai et b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim al sivotam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natav b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Please rise.
I'm going to cover this. She's number 5.
My daughter's birthday is tomorrow.
Yitkada v'yitkada shemei rabba v'yamad yivrachotei v'yamlich malchotei b'chayei v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael bahagala uv'izmahan ka'arei v'meru amen Yehei shmei rabba mivorach le'olam alal mehal ma'ayah Yet barach v'ishtabach v'itbar v'itruam v'idasei v'itadar v'talei v'talal shmei d'kudisha v'rechu le'lamin kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amihiran v'yarama v'meru amen. At this time we'll say prayers for healing for those in need. If you know of someone who's in need of healing, when I pause during this prayer, please quietly say the name of the person or people whom you have in mind. Mishaber Chavatino Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Imotino Sarah Rivka Rachavlea Hu Yaravarech Repet Kolacholiim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimelei Rachem Yimeleihem Lachazigam Rapatam Yishnach Lehem Mehera Refuah Shlema Min HaShemayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Hashta Bagalav Yizman Karev Ma'ar Amen. May the Holy One send healing of body, healing of spirit. May the Holy One grant courage to all who are ill and strength to those who support them. And let us say, Amen. We continue standing as we lift our first Sefer Torah.
Ya'amod HaMagbiya Ya'amod HaGolel Sefer Rishon
V'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei B'nei
Yisrael Al Pi Adonai
Ilu Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dainu, 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 Ilu natan lanu et haTorah natan lanu et haTorah daenu 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 daenu.
We may be seated. The reading for the Maftir Aliyah is found on page 391, with verse 16.
Yamod, Rav Moshe Ben Melech Valea Maftir.
Thanks. First month. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Marach Le'olam Ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. V'chodesh harishon b'Abas hayom l'chodesh Pesach l'Adonai v'chamisha asar yom l'chodesh hazeh chag shivat yamim matzot ye'achel b'yom harishon mikra kodesh kol melechet avodah lo tasu Bikrabtem Mishel al Adonai Parim b'nei bakar Shnayim v'ayel echad B'shivach v'asim b'nei shana Temimim yiyu lachem U'minchatam Solet lava shemen Shlosha esronim Lapar U'shnei esronim La'ayel tasu Isaron taseh lekeves ha'echad leshivat hakvasim u'seir chatat echad lechaper alechem milvad olat haboker asher li'olat tamid tasu et ele ka'ele tasu layom shivat yamim lechem misherei nichoch l'Adonai alalat tamid yesef v'nisko u'bayom hashvi mikra kodeshi elachem kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Please rise.
Hamagvia Yamod Hagalel Sefer Sheni
V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael b'Adonai b'yad Moshe.
Avadim hayinu ata b'nei chorim Avadim hayinu ata b'nei chorim Avadim hayinu ata b'nei chorim Ya la 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 la
Once the Torah is seated, we may be seated. The Haftorah is found on page 1,300 or 1,300, otherwise 1,300. And Joshua is getting ready, getting the people ready. Yashikoach, and many thanks to all our readers, our lifters, our rappers, and our gabayim. Tada. At this point, as I mentioned, there's going to be an observance of Pesach as the Israelites come into the land. We'll speak about this more later. One thing that I want everyone just to note that we won't speak about so much later, but it's just really cool. On page 1302, 1302, verse 13, is an amazing scene where Joshua, I'll just read it really quickly. Once when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him, drawn sword in hand, right? It's like the pistol is out of the holster and, it's ready to go. This is meaning once you draw, the sword is drawn, it's in his hand. This is kind of like, okay, it's go time. What are we doing here? Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you one of us or one of our enemies?" This is just like a fascinating, right? It's like, here's, it's in our parlance, the gun would be out and ready to go. And are you one of ours or one of theirs? Like, are you attacking us or not? It's just kind of an amazing scene. He replied, "No, I'm the captain of the Lord's host. Now I have come." Joshua threw himself face down on the ground and prostrating himself said to him, "What does my Lord command his servant?" The captain of the Lord's host answered Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet." It's another kind of Joshua-Moses scene, right? Just like Moshe, remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy, and Joshua did so. So just, and then it goes on to kind of with a little bit of the story of Jericho, right? So we see what's coming up, so to speak, following this whole time of the Exodus when the Jewish people are going to then enter the land. So we have a shift from becoming Am Yisrael, kind of birthed out of the sea and coming to Mount Sinai, to entering Eretz Yisrael with entering in. The Haftorah, page 1300. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo v'nviei haemet v'tzedek. Vayomer Yehoshua el ha'am hitkadashu Ki imacha ya'aseh Adonai b'kerbechem niflahot vayomer Yehoshua el hakohanim lemor se'u et Aaron habrit vivru lifnei ha'am vayisu et Aaron habrit v'elchu lifnei ha'am vayomer Adonai el Yehoshua Hayom hazeh achel gadelcha b'nei kol Yisrael asher yedun ki kasher hayiti im Moshe imach ba'et hahi amar Adonai el Yoshua aseh lecha charvot tzurim v'shuv mo et b'nei Yisrael shenit V'aslo Yoshua charvot tzurim v'yamo ebnei Yisrael el givat ha'aralot v'zeh hadavar Hashem al Yoshua koham hayotze mimitzrayim hazacharim ko anshe hamilchama metu v'midbar b'derech b'tzeitam mimitzrayim Ki mulim hayu koham hayotzim v'chol ha'am hayilodim b'midbar b'derech b'tzeitam mimitzrayim lo malu. This is verse 5. It's kind of an amazing verse that they weren't circumcised, that whole generation. Ki arba'im shana Halchu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar ad tom kol hagoy anshei hamelchama hayotzim mimitzrayim asher lo sham'u b'kol Adonai asher nishba Adonai lahem levelti harotam et haaretz asher nishba Adonai lavotam latet lanu eretz zavat chalav udavash ואת בניהם הקים תחתם אותם על יהושע כי ערלים היו כי לא מלאו אותם בדרך ויהי כאשר תמו כל הגויים מו, וישבו תחתם במחנה עד חיותם. ויאמר אדוני אל יהושע היום גלותי את חרפת מצרים עליכם. ויקרא שם המקום ההוא גילגל עד היום הזה. ויחנו בני ישראל בגילגל ועשו את הפסח ב14 יום לחודש בערב בערבות יריחו. ויאכלו מעבור הארץ ממחרת הפסח מצות וכלוי. בעצם היום הזה וישפוט המן ממחרת באוכלם מעבור הארץ, ולא היה עוד לבני ישראל מן, ויאכלו מתבואת ארץ כנען בשנה ההיא. ויהי ביות יהושע בריחו וישא עיניו וירא, והנה איש עומד לנגדו וחרבו שלופה בידו. וילך יהושע אליו ויאמר לו, הלנו אתה עם לצרינו. ויאמר לו, כי אני שר צבא אדוני אתה. והתי ויפול יהושע אל פניו ארצה וישתחו. ויאמר לו, מה אדוני מדבר אל עבדו? ויאמר שר צבא אדוני אל יהושע, שון עליך מעל רגליך, כי המקום אשר אתה עומד עליו קודש הוא. ויעש יהושע כן, ויריחו סוגרת ומסוגרת מפני בני ישראל, אין יוצא ואין בא. ויהי אדוני את יהושע, ויהי שומעו בכל הארץ. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך הארץ כל העמים, צדיק בכל הרעות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, מדבר קיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך ודבריך מדבריך, אך לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו, ולעלו בנפש ראשיה במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו. על כיסאו לא ישב זר ולא ינחלו עד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביא ועל יום חג המצות הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לששון ולשמחה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים. Thank you. We continue on page 339 at this time. Page 339. And thank you, Debbie, for leading us in Ashrei.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha od yachalucha selah.
Ashrei am shekacha lo, Ashrei am shadana Elohav.
Tehillah leDavid, armimcha Elohai hamelech, va'avarcha shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Bechol yom avarcheka, v'ala shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai umpulal me'od, v'ligdulato ein cheker.
Dor ledor yishavach masecha, ukrotecha yagidu.
Hadar kavod hodecha, v'divrei niflotecha asicha. Zecher rav tuvcha yabiyu, v'sid katcha yiranenu. Tov Adonai lakol, v'rachamav al kol ma'asav. Kavod malchutacha yomeru, ugvurotacha yadaveru.
Dear Lifnei Adam Gevurtav, Vod Hadar Malchuto.
Malchutacha malchut kol olamim, umemshaltecha bechol dor vador.
So mechan and oilachol no fleem, so kaif lachol hakfufim.
Einecho elochai saberu, ve'atanoten lachem et achlam be'ito.
Poteach et yadecha, umasbir lachol chai ratzon.
Tzadik Adonai bechol derachav, v'chasid bechol ma'asav.
Karov Adonai lachol korav, lachol asher kra'u ve'emet.
Ritzon yireav yaseh, ve'et shavatam yishma v'yoshiem.
Shomer Adonai ekol oavav, ve'ekol rasha'im yashmi.
Tihilat Adonai yedaber pi, vivarech kol basar shem kadsho leolam va'ed.
V'anachnu nevarech ya, me'atav yad olam. Hallelujah. We rise 340.
Yeah, hallelujah, et shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado.
Odo al eretz v'shamayim v'yarem keren le'amo tehila lekol chasidav lifnei Yisrael am karovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Vikarev Pizureinu, ay, 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 mi ben hagoyim. Unefutzateinu, kanes, kanes, mi arkete haaretz. Vikarev Pizureinu, ay, 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 mi ben hagoyim. Unefutzateinu, kanes, kanes, mi arkete haaretz. Unefutzateinu, kanes, kanes, unefutzateinu, kanes. Unefutzateinu, mi arkete haaretz. You say kanes. Unefutzateinu, 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 mi arkete haaretz. Lai la 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 lai lai la lai la lai, yai lai 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 la lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 la lai, yai lai la 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 lai lai la lai la lai, lai 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 la la lai la lai, ya la 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 lai lai, yai lai yai lai la la lai, yai.
Uvenucho yomar. Eitz chayim hi lemachazikim ba vetomchecha meushar derachea darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Hadesh Hadesh Yameinu Hadesh Yameinu Kekedem.
Yashakar. We may be seated. Lashana Tova. Shana Tova. What? Well, look, Alan just read about the first month in the Maftir Aliyah, right? The first month. Month number 1, as it was called, as opposed to month number 2, 3, 4. Those are the names of the months according to the Torah. So we're in month number 1, and I'm wearing a kittel. Well, I'm wearing a kittel because we're about to transition from Geshem, rain, to Tal, or dew. I happen to like Tal because I know someone named Talia who has a warm place in my heart. So transitions, in some ways that's what starting a new year may be about, thinking about transitions, going from one state to another and doing so in a conscious way. We have different transitions, right? We're aware, of course, during this time about the crossing of the sea, and what we didn't read from the Haftorah, we got just a snippet. It was like, it basically is calling out, read me later at home. Right? We had just the beginning of Joshua chapter 3, where Joshua is also going to, we think of crossing the sea, there's also crossing the river. We know about crossing the river. What river? The Jordan. The Jordan splits, just like the Red Sea, right? And we also had, just in the Haftorah, about Joshua also coming to a place and encountering and being told, take off your shoes for the land that you're on is holy. Transitions, going from one state to another, crossing over, right? So we have in a very obvious sense that Moshe is crossing over with the rest of the people of Israel from Egypt to the wilderness, where they're going to encounter God at Mount Sinai and receive the Torah. We have Joshua transitioning, going from this period of the wilderness, then entering Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, right, where they take hold there. And that's why maybe their revelations are different. Moshe gets a burning bush. Joshua gets an individual with sword already out of its sheath. Again, a little daunting from my perspective. But they're both looking at transitions from one to the other. In fact, we have other ideas about crossing over, and in particular, Avram, when he's going to turn into Avraham, is called Ha'ivri, the one who crosses over. So to speak, the whole world is on one side, and he crosses over to a different side. And this comes up in the Haggadah, which we read last night, in, I think, a really beautiful way. The Mishnah says that we should go, when we're telling the story of Pesach, when we're telling the story of Passover, we should go from Ganut l'Shevach. We should go from degradation to praise. And there's a debate. I know that's shocking to folks that there's a debate in Judaism. I really love Judaism because we say argument is important, because having different sides or seeing different perspectives is often the way that life functions. There's not just a simple one-size-fits-all way of looking at the world. And not only is this the debate in the Talmud between some of my favorite rabbis, Rav and Shmuel, but it comes into the Haggadah, and there it is. And so we say, Ma nishtana halayla hazeh, right? We ask, why is this night different from all other nights? And we really get two answers. And the answer that is like most obvious is really what Shmuel, the Rabbi Shmuel, wanted to go and emphasize, which is, hey, we were slaves in Egypt. Avadim hainu hainu, right? It's very obvious, like part of the story. Like when you're telling your kids about Pesach, like, you know, we're telling the next generation, we were slaves, we went free, we made this transition, right? And the water is a great kind of bridgeway, literally, like we went through. You can imagine it as a birth canal as well, going from one space to another, right? Where we were birthed out on the other side, we had been imprisoned and trapped, and now we went out into freedom, into a deeper relationship with God. And it's interesting on that note of we were slaves, but now we're free, that Rav has a different point of view about what should happen, and it goes in the Haggadah. And what Rav says is, actually, he quotes again from the book of Joshua, from the end of book of Joshua, from chapter 24. And he says, you know, we were a bunch of idol worshipers. And then we came into connection with God. that's not usually the story. We often say, when we think of like the Haggadah and telling the story of Pesach, that's not, none of the kids' books that I'm sharing at home emphasize that, right? And it really hit me last night in a big way as I was looking at this and kind of thinking about, that's interesting, because that's not really, again, we don't emphasize it with our kids. It's not usually, what's Passover about? Well, we were a bunch of idolaters, but then we got connected with God. That's a different kind of story. In some ways, it's maybe what happened, that maybe our people, there are concerns that when we were in Egypt, we had a lot of Egyptian influence, and that we then came out and had a deeper connection with God. But we don't often maybe emphasize it as much, thinking about these different ways of exiting, right? Often we talk about the Exodus on a very physical level, but Judaism recognizes these other kind of spiritual levels. This is something between Rav and Shmuel in general in the Talmud. Shmuel tends to go with a little bit more physical, a little bit more practical. He's the one who says, basically, the Messianic era, it's just going to be pretty much like now, just no war, but otherwise no big miracles and things like that, whereas Rav has some alternative, more, maybe you could say, more spiritual views, right? But this idea of these kind of more inner transitions, that's preserved in the Haggadah. And I think it's important, for us to kind of think about in various ways, one of which is, how does our society affect us? What are we so used to that we're not maybe even able to see it, right? Like the fish can't see the water because it's just all around them, or like there's air all around us, we can't really see it. What are we immersed in currently that maybe we need to bring more consciousness there to think about, do we need to exit? This is something that kind of hits me in a big way. There are a few examples that I have in my life, but what I really want is for y'all to think about examples for you. Because I can talk about my examples. Like, it's a funny thing. I know there's certain things when Talia started going, for example, and having us use like cloth bags when we went to get the groceries. Initially, I was like, cloth bags? That's not a thing. Everyone uses plastic. You go to the grocery store, you put the food in the plastic, you take the plastic and you throw it in the landfill. Oh, no, now you can recycle it, and should. If you get plastic bags, know that you can go to Kroger's and there's a big bin. But just that concept of using cloth bags was like a novelty. Who does that? A lot of the things that maybe we're just oblivious to are things that maybe we just, because we're living in certain environments, we don't even realize what's going on. This is a small example, but then a lot of it has to do with our habits. So now it's becoming easier for me when I'm going to go in and go to the grocery. Oh, we have these regular cloth bags. They're on our door. You can grab them and go. It's actually not so hard. It actually kind of becomes at a certain point kind of regular. But it's about the habits that we have. What are our habits? What are we on a personal level? What are we doing? How do we live our lives? What are the things that we get used to? You know, just a personal note, but this is for me. You have your own stories. But for me, it's like eating meat. I was used to eating meat, right? I mean, meatball sub, you know, and then there's like now in LA, they finally got like a kosher Subway, and you know, that was like a real machaya for me. I really enjoyed eating meat. My mother-in-law's schnitzel. I mean, if you haven't tried it, you really should. You know, it's really delicious. But then for me at this point, like, so I don't eat chickens anymore, and I don't eat cows. Like, I stopped eating them, and now that's okay, right? Just like at a certain point, I decided to keep kosher, right? That was also a transition. Right, there was a time when I was going to dim sum and having chashuba, you know, the little dumplings with a certain kind of meat, basar lavan. You know what that means? It's the white meat that refers to something that we won't say, right? But it was yummy. It's okay. But at a certain point, like, my friends were doing it. We would all go to dim sum together, right? But at a certain point, I went and I Abraham, I went to the other side, this other side, right, that Moshe does and Joshua does. And I think it's really interesting to think about, here our ancestors, they were doing what everyone else was doing, which was worshiping idols, right? That's in the Haggadah. But then they separated themselves. And it was not an easy transition. It was not just like, hey, remember after Exodus, and then we were faithful to God, the Israelites just worshiped God and Baal. What? Right? That's the whole thing with Elijah, who visited last night. Yeah, the kids were like, maybe we should give him chocolate milk. He's got so much wine everywhere. I really loved it. Next year at the Seder, a cup with just chocolate milk, But there he was later on, fighting with the prophets, most of them of Baal. He was like a yachid position, right? This wasn't like a slam dunk for our people just to worship God. Oh, the Israelites, they worship monotheism, that's it. In Jeremiah 44, there's a fascinating passage where the people fight back with Jeremiah saying, no, we're going to do what our ancestors have always done, tradition, and worship other gods. Right? It's only like, we're used to Judaism like kind of Second Temple period on, when of course just one God and that's it. Right? But there were fights going on. And there may be things that we need to do in our personal lives or in our communal lives. Maybe there are traditions that we need to make that are not going to be such an easy flip. Oh, it's not just like, hey, I just decide to do something or make a change and that's it. I put on a kittel, I make up my mind, I'm just good. Maybe it's something that we do need to kind of think about. Sometimes going la'at, slowly, and being able to make these changes. But the sense of transition, of crossing over to the other side, that's part of Pesach. And I'm very grateful to Rav for bringing that additional perspective to our Seders. We continue at this time on page 342. 342 with Chatzi Kadesh. And we're going to daven Musaf quietly. It begins on page 343. And then we'll have the repetition where we introduce Tal into our davening. And just a little note. Just that we have the blessing for Tal, page 344. This is actually, so we have, there are some debates about this, but you can still say Mashiv HaRuach HaMorid HaGashem in the quiet Amidah, and then we all transition to Tal together. But right now, Chatzi Kadesh 342. Yitkadahu v'yitkadahu Shemei Rabbah V'yamad yivarach hiruteh V'yamlich malchuteh B'chayechon u'v'yomechon U'v'chayedechu Beit Yisrael B'hagala u'bizman karev V'meru amen Yehesh Shmei Rabbah mevarach Le'olam amen Almaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitaleh V'yitadar v'yitaleh Shmei Kodesh HaBarichu La'ela Mikol v'erchata v'shirata Tush b'chata v'nechemata Da'amiran b'alma v'meru amen. We daven quietly on page 343. you're still davening, please go ahead and continue. We're going to begin the repetition. It's found on page 374. Page 374. Adonai sifatai tiftachu ufiya gitilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftachu ufiya gitilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotzeinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh Hakul v'Zocher Chazdei Avot v'Imahot U'Mevi Kohel Livnei V'Nehem L'Ma'an Shemo v'Ahava Melech Ozer Foker Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham, Ufoked Sarah, Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechayim Eitim Atah Rav L'Hoshia. Page 375. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotzeinu. Tal tal tal, ten litzot artzach, Shiseinu bracha v'ditzach. Rov dekan v'tirosh b'hafritzach, komem ir b'chevtzach b'tal tal tal. Tzavei shana tova u'teret, pri haaretz legaon u'tiferet, irka suka no teret, sima b'yadcha teret b'tal tal tal. Noveva le'eret brucha, mimeged shmaim sabinu bracha, la'er mitocha chashecha, kanacharecha mishucha be. Tal tal tal, yasif tzuv ha'arim, tehem bimodecha muvcharim, chanunecha chaletz mimaskerim, zimrananim, Vekonarim betal tal tal Vasova male asameinu Hachaet techadesh yameinu Dod kerkecha hamed shemeinu Gan ravesimeinu betal tal tal Bot barach mazon Bamishmaninu ayehi razon Ayuma asher hisata katzon Anatafek la ratzon betal Shatahu Adonai Eloheinu Mashiv hamruach omrid hatal Livracha v'lo nikrala Lechaim v'lo lemavet Lesova v'lo l'razon Amen. The ark is closed and we continue on page 344. Mechakel chayim bechesed, mechayei meitim berachamim rabim, so'omech noflim verofech olim, umatir asurim, ומקייהם אמונתו לשני העפר מחמוך בגבורות ומדומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ולמענת על החיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. 345 נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב היה נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך על הארץ כבודו כבודו מלא מלא העולם כבודו מלא העולם כבודו מלא מלא העולם כבודו מלא העולם משותף שואלים זה אל הזה, משותף שואלים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו, משותף שואלים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו יבן ברחמים ויחונם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים באהבה שמה אומרים שמע ישראל Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshiachenu, Vehu Yashmienu, Berachamav Shenit. שנית לעיני כל חי לעולכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדירנו אדוני אלוהינו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ והיה אדוני למלך הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלך עלי לעולם מלך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We may be seated 346. אתה בחרתנו מכל העמים, אותנו רצית בנו, רממתנו מכל השנות וקדשנו עצתך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לעבודתך, ושמך הגדול והקדוש עלינו קראת, ותיתן לנו אדוני לנבבה, מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, את יום חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו, מקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים. 347. יהי רצון מלפניך עלינו ולבתנו במותנו, מלך רחמן המשיב בנים לגבולם, שתשוב ותרחם עלינו במקדשך ברחמך רבים, ותבנהו מהרה ותגדל כבודו. אבינו מלכנו גלה כבוד מלכותך עלינו מהרה, ועופע ונשא עלינו כל חי, וקרב בזורנו מבין הגויים, ונפוצותינו כנס מירכתי הארץ. ואבינו לציון עירך בראינה בירושלים בית מקדשך בשמחת עולם, ששם עשו אבותינו ואמותינו לפניך את קורבנותיהם תמידים כסדרם ומספים כהלכתם, ואת מוסף יום חמצות הזה עשו ויקרבו לפניך באבק מצוות רצונך ככתוב בתורתך על ידי משה עבדך מפי כבודך כאמור. Page 348. בחודש הראשון ב14 יום לחודש פסח לאדוני, ו15 יום לחודש הזה חג שבעת ימים מצות יחל. ביום הראשון מקרא קודש כל מלאכה לא תעשו, והקרבתם אישי עולה לאדוני פרים בני בקר 2 ואל 1 ו7 כבשים בני שנה תמימים יהיו לכם, ומנחתם ונתקכם כמדובר 13 לפר ו12 לעין ובשרון לכבש ביין כניסקו ושעיר לכפר ושני תמידים כהלכתם. We continue on page 351 and with the Kohanim begin to prepare. Eloheinu v'le'avotinu v'imotinu melech rachaman rachem aleinu tov meiti dirash lanu shuva aleinu b'hamon rachamecha biglal avot v'imot shasu ritzonecha בני ביתך כבתחילה בכונן מקדשך מכונאו והראינו בבניינו ושמחנו בתיקונו וששב כהנים לעבודתם ולוויים לשירם ולזמרם והשב יסוב ולוויהם ושם נעלה ונראה ונשתחווה לפניך בשלוש פעמי רגלינו ככתוב בתורתך שלוש פעמים בשנה ייראה כל זכורך את פני אדוני אלוהיך במקום אשר יבחר בחג המצות ובחג השבועות ובחג הסוכות ולא יראה את פני אדוני ריקם איש כוונת ידו כי ברכת אדוני אלוהיך אשר נתן לך ועשיינו אדוני אלוהינו את ברכת בורדיך לחיים ולשלום לשמחה לששון כאשר רצית ואמרת לברכנו אלוהינו ואבותינו ואמותינו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן לכל קרבה תורתך סבנו בטובך ושמחנו בישועתך וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת והנחילנו אדוני בשמחה וששון בורדי קודשך וישמחו בך יודעך וישמחו בך ישראל מקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל בהזמנים רצה אדוני אלינו בעמך ישראל בתפילתם ושבת עבודה לדבר ביתך ותפילתה בבת גמרתן ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך page 352 ותערב לבניך עתירתנו כעולה וכקורבן ענה רחום ברחמך רבים השב שכינתך לציון עירך וסדר עבודה לירושלים ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון רחמים ושם נעבוד חבירה כי מעולם וכשנים קדמוניות ברוך אתה אדוני שאותך לבדך בירה נעבוד מודים אנחנו לך שאתה הוא אדוני אלינו ותלנו למעט צורכנו ונשנו נודה לך תפילתך הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך ואמרחם כי לא תמוך חסדך מעולם קיווינו לך וכולם יתברך וירם שמך מקהלת ומלעד וכל החיים יודוך סלע ויעלו את שמך באמת היל שרתנו ועשרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך לך נאה להודות 353 אלוהינו ולאבותינו ואמותינו ברכינו בברכה משולשת בתורה כתובה ידי משה עבדך אמורה מפי אהרון ובניו כהנים עם קדושך כאמור
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו בקדושתו של אהרון וציוונו לברך את עמו ישראל מאהבה.
אמן. יברכך אדוני וישמרך אמן. יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה אמן. יישא אדוני פניו אליך ויעשם לך שלום. עתיר במרום שוכן בגבורת השלום בשמך שלום. יהי רצון שתשים עלינו וכל עמך בית ישראל חיים וברכה למשמרת שלום. page 354. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Barcheinu avinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Ki ve'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, Torat Chaim v'ahavat chesed, tzedakah uvracha v'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. V'tohu beinecha levarech samecha Yisrael b'chol et u'b'chol shah b'shlomecha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Sim shalom balam tova uvracha. Baruch atah Adonai hamorech et hamoisel b'shalom. We continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 203. Yitkalo yitkala shmei rabba b'yamat yivrach yirtev yamlich machateh b'chaychonu b'mechonu b'chaydecho b'disra b'galav yizman karevim b'ramen yehei shmei rabba b'vorach le'olam alal mehal ma'aya Yitbarach v'yishtamach v'yitbar v'yitrama minaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalash medekudisha B'reichu layla min kol berchata v'shirata tushbachata v'rachmata t'miram b'yama v'yimbramen Titkabal tzladono atano l'chal yisrael kadam avani v'shmaya v'yimbramen Hey shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu al kol yisrael v'yimbramen Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu al kol yisrael v'al kol yisrael tevel v'yimbramen. Aleinu is found on page 204. Ein Kelohenu, that's what I meant. Slicha, Ein Kelohenu, page 204.
Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Eloheinu, Mi Adonenu, mi Chamokeinu, mi Chamoshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, no Eloheinu, no Adonenu, no Lemalkeinu, no Moshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Atahu Shektiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha, Et Ketores Hasamim. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Hachamim, Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, Shene'emar v'chol banayich limudei Adonai, v'rav Shalom banayich, al tikra banayich, ele banayich. Shalom Rav, Shalom Rav, le'ohav b'chtei Tortecha, ve'ein lahamo, ve'ein lahamo, ve'ein lahamo mishol. Yehi shalom b'chelech, shalva be'armenotayich. Yehi shalom b'chelech, shalva be'armenotayich. Leman achai v're'ai, leman achai v're'ai, adabrana, adabrana, shalom bach, leman beit Adonai Eloheinu, avak shatov lach, Adonai os le'amo iten, Adonai varech et amo v'shalom. We rise for Leno, page 205. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula leotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpechot hadama, shelo sam chelkenu kahen, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu Livnei Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Noten Shamayim ve'Yosef Haaretz, Moshe v'Karo b'Shamayim v'Ima, U'Shchinatu zo, v'Gohei Meromi, Hu Eloheinu, Enod, Emet Malkeinu, Efes Ulato, Kakatu Betora'ato, V'yadatayom, Behashevota, Elevavecha, Ki Adonai, Hu HaElohim, B'Shamayim, Mi'ima'al, Ve'al ha'aretz, Mitachat ein od, ein od. Okay. 206 toward the bottom. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam v'ahen.
V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo Once the ark is closed, we may be seated. Before we recite Mourner's Kaddish, we remember Evelyn Graff, whose yard site is today. Are there other yard sites to remember? Mourner's Kaddish is found on page 207. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah v'yalmad yivrach yerotev v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Ba'agala v'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yahei shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam amei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'rechu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, tamiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yahei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. For all those whom we remember, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing, and may all who mourn find comfort. Just a few very brief but uplifting announcements. Please join us tomorrow at 9 a.m. Rabbi Burke is going to be giving the drash. I'm excited. I think I'll come. And also just wanted to wish everyone a Zisen Pesach. It's nice in many ways that as opposed to if we were in Israel, that would have been it. But here we have opportunities in the United States for our Seder with the other set of in-laws, or just an additional Seder for fun. So please, whether you're coming this evening here to Adath Israel or having your own, wish everyone wonderful Seders, meaningful and joyous, and a Zisen Pesach. We conclude today on page 211 with Adon Olam. Thanks, Jan. Many thanks to all our daveners and readers and gabaim and ark openers.
Everybody.
To everyone.
Everybody. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. So we're going to do this other tune here. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol
yetzeh nivra li'et nasa v'chefzo kol zay melech shemo nikra.
V'acharei kichlot hakol v'ado yimloch nara v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yeh b'tifora v'hu echad v'en sheni lehamshilo lehachbiro v'li reshit v'li tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'hamizra v'hu eli v'chagoli v'tzur chevli v'yetzara v'hu nisi u'manosli menat kosi b'yom ekra b'yado avkid ruchi b'yetishan v'oira v'im ruchi geviyati Adonai li v'lo ira.
Yasher Koch, good. Yontif, please join us for a little nosh right here in the foyer, and good Yontif, everyone. Yasher Koch, and thank you.